Hello, dear viewers. I recommend you turn off the lights and put on your headphones. You are watching Tales from the Crypt. Enjoy the show.
This story happened 20 years ago. The guys from the Felfak then went through the practice and sent them to a village. It was located in the very depths of Russian land. But from there, they were determined that only the ancient old men lived there. And therefore, the practice could have turned out to be rich in folklore material and all sorts of things here, even if they had. They settled the students, and there were 5 of them. Baba Dunya, a cute little old lady, looked at which he was amazed and how much the soul held on. However, the soul not only held on, but also very actively fought for this life. Baba Dunya had a large garden and 2 goats in the herd. With the garden, however, children helped, coming on weekends from the city. But with the goats, Baba Dunya fought alone. She mowed the hay for them right behind the house. Fortunately, the meadows began immediately, as the house was on the outskirts. She fed and looked after them like her own grandchildren. In the evenings, the old harmonium was taken out of the closet, went out to the gates, sat down on the bench, and gave free concerts. She remembered her youth as she said. Students, in 2 days, ploughed the garden and then took on their direct work. Folklore collection. They walked around the houses whole week and had heart-to-heart conversations with the locals. Many things were told to them by old people. Everything was written in a thick notebook and put in a travel bag. And when all the stories were probably told again, and there was still a whole week of practice ahead, the students decided to go on a hike to the local forest. Not far, of course, not to get lost. From the evening, they collected food supplies, water, matches, salt, a tent, provided the campus, of course. And in the morning, we set off. We promised to return to Babyduna the next day, by evening. The forest rang all the bells, the birds sang, the sun shone, everyone was in a good mood, the students were of them waiting for the holidays, entertainment and rest. Soon, a well-noticed path began to narrow, and after that, it disappeared. But it did not bother anyone. Because everything was expected, who would go to the forest? There were almost no young people in the village. The youngest resident was over 60. The guys were talking about it and about everything. They recalled funny events in their lives, discussed teachers and classmates, and shared plans for the upcoming vacation. Soon ahead, the gap between them was overgrown, and tourists decided to take a break. An hour later, the company moved on. So slowly, young people moved further and further from the village. However, the forest was bright and green. The weather was good, the compass worked properly. Therefore, it was decided to walk a little more. Soon it started to get dark, and the guys decided that it was time to get ready for the night. Well, in the morning, they moved back. In a small space free from the forest, they put up a tent, spruce trees, and deployed a camp. In addition, there was a lake nearby where you could wash your hands. While 3 people were setting up everything in the camp, 2 others went to the forest to set the fire. It was already quite dark, since the forest was denser here and more war breed grew. Everything was fine. Suddenly, 2 of those who went to the forest ran back screaming, scaring everyone. To the questions about what happened, the couple replied that it was better to see it your own eyes. And the whole company moved in that direction where the frightened comrades were shown. What opened their eyes looked really scary. On a round-shaped flat glade, where low, thick grass grew, trees stood on the perimeter and were tied on each trunk. So at first it seemed to everyone the horror had captured the gathered. The boys came closer to understand what happened here, and, considering how the children should be, they exhaled and shouted to the girls that it was just dolls. The girls decided to come up and also look at everything with their own eyes. Dolls on the trunks of trees in white, on the dark background with white skin on the level of human growth. These were dolls, very similar to real children. Others were nailed to nails, others tied with a rope. The third simply clung between branches. There was no clothes on dolls. Some had partial or no limbs. Others had torn abs and swollen insides, in which insects and worms were burrowing. The small body parts, the dolls, were greenish, blue spots, similar to body parts. But all of them were combined by one common trait. No matter how the body parts of the dolls were not born, all of them had whole eyes. And the look of these eyes was so clear that it seemed as if the dolls were, well, just alive. The most terrible thing was that all the dolls looked at one point, turning their small hairless heads, just like the place where the "What a horror," finally said Lily. "What is this place?" "I don't know," answered Sergei, "but it looks all nasty. However, it is already dark, and we have no choice anyway. We will the night here. And in the end, these are just dolls, supported by Lyosha, although scary." The camp one by one. The dolls were watched by the dead eyes. It was a bad night. The guys heard strange rustling sounds, as if someone was around the tent. In the high, wet grass, they trample with small legs and scrape sharp claws the tent walls. Also, the night was not cold in the summer, which was strange. Finally, the morning came. As soon as dawn broke, the friends got out of the tent, tired and hungry. It was decided to set up a fire to warm up and have breakfast, and then move back. Vika suddenly screamed. The guys ran up, saw how she pointed somewhere with her hand. There in the grass, almost at the very tent, lay a doll. How could she have been here? She asked the other people, a trembling voice. Maybe she was here, we just didn't notice. Come on, said Lyosha. We would have noticed her when we put up the tent. She was lying right next to her. Guys, I don't like it, said Lilia. This is a strange glade. Creepy dolls. The sky is where it came from in the deaf forest, this rustling around the tent all night. Now we will eat and go to the village, said Dennis. I also feel somehow not right here. The guys quickly had breakfast and, extinguishing the fire, moved on the way. However, after walking some distance, friends noticed that the road does not look like yesterday. Dennis got the compass. His arrow was shaking in one place, not moving left or right. What nonsense is going on? After all, we walked on the same path yesterday and everything was fine, he exclaimed. Others were confused, just like Dennis. It was decided to go to the corner, pointing at the sun, a ma, and familiar places, if there were any. It was already over half a day. Everyone was thirsty, the water supplies ran out, and the village was not visible. The girls were crying, the guys were bravely trying to find the way. The day passed. The sun was leaning west when the light was burning ahead. The happy guys hurried to meet. However, it was not a village. A lonely house was on the glade, a large dog around the house. Seeing the guys, she screamed loudly. "Bars, come to me!" He screamed, and an elderly man of the house. It was a forest man. He invited the guys to the house, sat them down at the table, and after dinner, began to ask about where they were from. Fiends told their story. From which village? The forest ranger listened carefully and then said, "Your village is about 80 kilometers from here." Yes, don't be surprised. I didn't make up my mind. This happens here sometimes. You saw yourself how your compass was. Friends looked over. The forest ranger didn't look like an inadequate person, but his words sounded, well, just unreal. "What about the fields with dolls?" asked Lily. "There are no less than 100 of them there. Who could bring them to the forest?" "Okay, I'll tell you what I know." "Shut up," said the forest ranger. "You spend the night at my place, and in the morning I will take you to the neighboring village. It is literally half an hour walk from my house. A runs from there to your village once a day. I will arrange for you to be brought for free." The guys were staying overnight. The forest man, who was called Uncle Misha, began the story. "There used to be a village nearby. Now it is completely abandoned. There is no one left. So once, when life was still boiling in these areas, a disaster happened there. One night, the children slept in all the houses, and in the morning, they did not wake up. No, they did not die. They were breathing, but at the same time, they were absolutely like... They were not alive. They didn't cry. They didn't move. They didn't ask for a breast. They just lay there like dolls. The only thing that made it clear that they were still alive was their breathing. It was very weak. There's no doctor in the village. You had to go to the city, which is about 100 kilometers from here. And I must say, the inhabitants of this village did not particularly welcome doctors and strangers. They were either sectarians or someone else. In general, they were all visited by an ancient old woman whom they worshipped, well, like some kind of witch. I think, by the way, she didn't let this scoundrel, so to speak, raise his authority and power, so people rushed to her, saying, what to do, how to... And she came to the hut, looked at the children and said that had come to the village and would die in 2 days. But she can save them. For this you need to go to the city and bring a doll from there. 1 doll for each child. Maddened by the grief of people who believe in the whole old witch. Maddened by the grief of people who believe in the whole old witch. The 3rd Legion was assembled and several people were sent to the city to bring the doll. The next day they came back. Dolls lying on cartons in cartons. They looked like live babies, in pink and white circles. The dolls were made wonderful, and the witch ordered to drag all the babies to the center of the village, and to put them right on the one ground, and doll next to every baby. They did everything to people, and the old woman declared that now she would transfer the death of the children to dolls. I don't know what she was doing there, but only the children really lived, cried, and carry the dolls into the forest, and they're already tied to the trees, whispered certain words. The villagers did everything that the witch ordered with joy, and slowly life began to return to the usual course. Only soon, people began to wander in that forest. Just like you, other people disappeared. And those who found the way and returned told about living dolls who live in the forest, and they said terrible things. I will not retell everything to you. It's not for anything. But the dolls and the truth are not dead. Someone or something lives in them. Over time, they deteriorate. But their eyes remain unchanged. I was convinced of this myself. After all, I working in this forest for of my life. Judging by the doubts and truthfulness of this story, you should not have stayed. Really terrible things happened to those who went out to that glade. You did a good job. You just got lost, and that's it. And there was also something that the dead found people. And they told those who were lucky. The living got out, and they saw how the children ran the grass at night, and not only at night. So this is what exists in the local forests. Be careful. It's not easy, because in such a deafening, about 100 dolls turned out to be on trees, right? The man asked, pouring himself into a cup of tea. We looked at him and listened carefully to every word he said. Okay, let's go to sleep. Tomorrow, it's time to get up. The bus only goes in the morning. In the morning, the forestry officer took the guys to the village and put them on the bus. On the same day, they packed their bags and, thanking the hospitality of the old lady, left for the city.